good people. Welcome to the first episode of the Evolving Education Project, a podcast by Dr. Tiffany M, Nyachae, that is me, and friends. For this episode, I have with me Dr. Grace D. Player.
Hey.
Hey, the artist who created our beautiful artwork that I'm sure you've seen since you're listening. But before we get started, before we have Grace explain and describe the artwork, the beautiful artwork she created for the podcast, I'm sure you want to know what the Evolving Education Project is. So I'm going to tell you what it is real quick. But honestly, the more you listen, the more you'll understand what it is. Like to the episode. So go subscribe now so that you can be listening every time we have an episode. Okay. The Evolving Education Project centers the educational joys, passions, interests, and inquiries of people of color. Now, I want to explain to you what we mean by people of color. We mean non-white individuals throughout the world who experience racism daily and who are affected by structural racism. Some groups that fall under the broad and vague category of people of color include people who identify as either Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian, biracial, and or multiracial. Still, these identifiers can be unclear when detached from ethnicity, language, tribe, culture, histories, and land. So at the Evolving Education Project, our discussions of people and groups of color are historically and contextually situated, responsive to the ever-changing times and political needs of particular groups among people of color, and attentive to their multiple intersecting identities. For example, gender, language, sexuality, ability, able-bodiedness, nationality, religion, social class, etc. With this in mind, the Evolving Education Project is a generative space where conversations and learning around the education of children of color, youth of color, and people of color are actually shaped by the perspectives and knowledges of people of color, collectively and or among distinct groups. In this way, we advance loving people of color just as we are, and seeing the stories and knowledge among distinct groups of people of color as legitimate and enough. For a long time, questions around the education of quote unquote these children have been answered under the white gaze and in ways that recenter whiteness. At the Evolving Education Project, we disrupt this norm by learning from various members of these groups who are invested in the lives of people of color, such as parents, caregivers, tias, tios, abuelas, abuelos, other mothers, big cousins, community workers, teachers, educators, collectives, and coalitions. As we learn with and from people of color, we co-construct knowledge in ways that honor and revive the knowledge production and knowledge dissemination practices of our ancestors while inspiring transformative work for just futures. Okay, so that's what it is. So now let me tell you our life work, what we do here. We advance loving people of color just as we are and seeing our stories and knowledge as legitimate and enough. We affirm and cultivate the confidence, knowledge, expertise, and educator identities of justice-oriented individuals who are invested in children of color, youth of color, and people of color, and who educate in and across a variety of spaces and contexts. So if you care about and love people of color, this podcast is for you. If you see yourself as one who educates, counsels, and or mentors, or you just chop it up with people of color in any way, shape, or form, this podcast is for you. Because we know it takes a village. It does take a village. So our dream is for the Evolving Education Project to spark localized, politically aligned collectives, supportive and loving learning communities, virtual or otherwise, and justice coalitions that are invested in the wholeness and goodness of children of color, youth of color, and people of color. We dream of a space where parents, caregivers, and educators from traditional and non-traditional settings look to us for justice-centered and honoring affirmation, advice, wisdom, knowledge, and materials as they pertain to people of color. We dream of a space where children and youth are welcomed and viewed as central to our learning around education. We also dream of a space where folks who are out here doing this transformative work that brings joy to our people, are given an authentic platform. We dream of a space where people of color can grapple with their daily realities while still making space to dream. So, with that in mind, we're going to bring in our wonderful artists. First, I'm going to tell you the story of how Grace, we're going to say it together, right, Grace?
Yeah.
Co-storying, yes. Co-storying about how Grace was just the person who embodies all of this and to do this artwork. So Grace and I have been friends for maybe about 7 years now, I would say.
Probably about 7,
maybe 7 years. So about 7, I would say maybe 7, 8 years. I know I met Grace my second year in my doctoral program, I believe.
Yeah. And at the ethnography forum.
What'd you say?
At the ethnography forum.
That's the ethnography forum at the University of Pennsylvania, right? That they have every year. And we just became friends. And I think that this is important, an important story to tell, because it is a podcast by Tiffany, by me, by myself and friends. Like my friends, it's a community podcast. My friends, people that I'm in community with, have really rallied around to make this possible. So it's not something that I could have even done by myself or I want to do by myself. And so we met, we just connected. We're very goofy when we get together. Wouldn't you say?
I would say maybe a little bit. I have a rush of memories of like all the silliness, just
a lot of love, a lot of joy, a lot of silliness. And I would say, Grace, that we have shared commitments, political commitments about the wellness and goodness of people of color. I think we do.
Absolutely. I mean, I think like part of what drew me to you and our friendship was not only the just joyfulness that like I get from you and, you know, all of that, but I think part of that joy though too is just, I saw you as someone who like shared your vision, you know, shared a vision with me and shared desires and hopes and all of that stuff around people of color. And, you know, everything you've already described is just, I'm just like, yes, 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 and yes.
So I kept saying, I'm like, Grace. So Grace was out here just doing artwork for everybody in the field of literacy. I mean, you could just see her artwork all over the education world. And it was just amazing. I just also saw Grace as someone who, even though she's a professor and we were both working to PhD, she sees her work as beyond that. She sees her work as, she doesn't have like this in a box understanding of her work for justice, for making the world a better place, for herself, for her artistry. She is an artist. And so I just saw her engaging in very different ways as our friendship grew, such as not only writing articles, which is what we're told to do in our field. Oh, also we're both former teachers. Like we're both former like legit classroom teachers with children and youth of color. And so we this is a hard work for us. We love what we do. We really work with youth, and we still work with youth. Grace does things with girls of color. I do things with Black girls of color, youth of color. So we're still working with youth. And so we care about what happens. We care about our own education and our communities. So when I went to Grace and I was like, Grace, I got to tell you something. She's like, what?
That's how I sounded.
Is that how it goes? I just want to make sure. Am I okay?
Listen, yes, absolutely. So the acting skills that come out now through a podcast. Isn't that great?
But I was like, Grace, I want to do this podcast and I want you to do the artwork. She's like, okay, yes, absolutely. 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 Like, and I think, and I appreciate you, Grace, for that, because sometimes when you get these ideas like this, and you share with your friends, you need them to be like, yes, absolutely. And just be like, rule you on, I ain't have a plan. I didn't have a sentence. I didn't know what the dream was. I just knew something. And Grace was like, yes, absolutely. Absolutely, I will.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's such a huge thing is like when we do this work in community and we build these communities, a little fragment of a dream becomes something fully realized. And I'm just, anything I can do for my sister Tiffany, I'm there because her dreams are beautiful. And, I want to be part of that and support it, push it, because I know she's going to do the same for me.
That's right. Reciprocity. Reciprocity.
Here we go.
But so I went and I was like, so first I was like, I'm gonna start this year. And I kept like pushing back the start date. I was like, this is what I want, this is what I want. So finally I got real serious this summer. And I was like, Grace, I'm really doing it and I'm really gonna start. And she was like, okay. And I was like, let's have a meeting and let's think about this. So I'm like, okay, I need to come prepared. So I come to the meeting with Grace. So we have this meeting. Let me tell y'all, I was so all over the place. I had a James Baldwin quote. I had, I think I had a June Jordan phone. I had a picture of kids, and I was like, so, Grace, the essence of education is, and she was like, So Grace let me talk all over the place. I was just like all over the place. She just let me talk, and I was like, yeah. And so finally, Grace was like, can I show you something? Like, can I show you something that I've worked on? I said, you already came here prepared with something. She was like, yes, let me show you. So she showed me 3 styles. And she was like, which one do you like the most? Which one do you like? Because that's the style. And I was like, I love this first one. This first one is so great. And she was like, oh, you do? Well, you can have that because I created that. That's what I thought of. I created that. I was like, you did? Remember?
I remember.
I was like, I started crying. I'm a heart person. So I was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. So Grace, with that story and you just the brilliance of you, can you just tell us like what inspired you? Like you could tell us all of this stuff, like what it means to you, what you were thinking of when you created it and all of that. And I'll shut up.
Yeah. Never shut up, Tiffany. Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you for, that story because I just love our friendship and I love where it came from and I love how it's evolved. I think about from that moment we met at the ethnography forum and just immediately started like cutting it up and just making jokes. Whatever. We were making jokes. About white supremacist education, I guess. Right. Yeah. So we were doing that from the get-go. But then, even just like thinking about the time we like shared a room at NCTE at a conference. And then, and just like the constant, phone calls and FaceTimes and just all of this, even through the pandemic, just having FaceTime calls, especially at the beginning when I was just like floundering, just like having you to ground me and, really, really focus on what the heck is going on has always been so important to me. So that is all to say, knowing you in these various forms, both as a sister, I mean, not all these things are like intertangled, but as a sister, as an academic, as a scholar, as a writer, as an educator, as an activist, all of these things that I know about you resonate with me. And also, when you asked me to do this project, it was like, A of all, yes, right away. As I said, my sister Tiffany, she's doing the work and anything I can do to like help that work happen, I'm there because it's beautiful and everything you do is beautiful and I'm always appreciative of it. So that was the first level. Second level is like, okay, so Tiffany asked me to do this thing. Let me start envisioning, let me start thinking, let me start like just playing around with images and thoughts. And, I had all these things in my head about who Tiffany was, what your work Sorry, I'm talking about you as if you're like another, as if you're not right in front of me on the screen.
Okay.
But I started thinking about you as a person, as a teacher, as a visionary, educational visionary. And, these things came to mind: love, care, your vibrancy, your joy, your, just the connections that you have to people. And I knew even before from our beginning conversations about the podcast and project, but like you hadn't brought me the James Baldwin and the Jordan and all of that stuff specifically, but all of what I know about all that stuff was already there in my mind about who you are, this, what I envisioned this was probably going to be, just because we're sisters like that, right? Yeah, and so then I just wanted to create something that I knew was going to capture, or I wanted to capture some of that joy, the love, the care, the vibrancy, and like the transformation, all like practices and potential of education when education is done well, and when education does center the beauty, the knowledge, the relationships, the solidarity, all of that, of people of color, of teachers of color, youth of color, and all the creation. So, in this like one simple image that I wanted to put together that like, and then like aesthetically just thinking about how do I create something that's like grabbing, that will like be small, can be different scales and still look good. I just started drawing, and I think there was something in me from you and your spirit that just came through when I drew it. And and so in the final image that you can see if you click on your little icon, it's it's a picture of a Black woman teacher who was dressed kind of fly, I think.
Hey.
And children, children of color, and gathering together, creating words, creating knowledge, creating love through that educational process, and centering themselves, stating their importance, and that was really what I wanted to convey, because I knew that was so much of who you are and what you do. So
much of who we are and what we do.
Listen, absolutely. And and then thinking too, like not only about our friendship between the two of us, but our extensive networks of friendships and like people who have lifted us. Thinking about so many of our mentors, our older sister mentors, our aunties, like all of this stuff. Who have lifted us, and we have a lot of the same mentors who have just created these pathways for us. That I hope that we can do justice to. And I think the way we do justice to them is follow in their footsteps, and the way they've created sisterhoods and they've created these like lifting mechanisms for us as women of color in the academy, and do that with each other and for the next generation. That's so, anything we can do, and I know this is going to be a space that is committed to that work. So, yeah.
And I love how you brought up like our aunties in the field and throughout different parts of our life, our village. I tell people all the time, I didn't get my pedagogy or the way I teach or the way I am and how I think about education from my collegiate career or going to college and getting degrees. I tell people all the time I got it from my working class, Black church, Sister Annette, Sunday school, and people who maybe they very brilliant folks, but maybe didn't have degrees or letters behind their names for, we know those systems that prevent those things and make that difficult for our people, but who had high expectations, who was teaching me at very high levels. And then I was going, in schools, and they're telling me I'm a struggling reader, but I'm in my working class Black church reading King James Version Bible, thou shalt interpreting it at 5. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
And then, and so I think like it does take a village. It's a village, and I'm grateful to my entire village who, throughout the PhD program, before the PhD program, when I was a classroom teacher, before I was even a teacher as a child, that have poured into me, that have invested into me, that believed in me, believed in my cousins, believed in all of us, all of the people I came up with. And so, and they care about these conversations. And I think that's another important thing that I want from the podcast, which I'll say is to make discussions and knowledge around the education of people of color more accessible to families and all educators. Now that we have these PhDs, and we're right. We sometimes we only talk to other PhDs, but we're not the only people that are educating our babies, that care about our communities, that are doing this work every day.
Just think about,
right?
I'm writing this piece right now with a couple of my former students who are now first year teachers. And we've just been talking about like all of the work that happened at the kitchen table,
Yes.
and the rich space of just like, how's your mother teaching you? How's your father teaching?
Yes.
How are your sisters? How are you then teaching your younger siblings? And like all this work that happens in those spaces that don't get counted as educational spaces. And I think that what you're doing here is creating a new platform, because even with that article, I'm thinking like strategically, where am I going to put it that's an open access?
Yes.
So they can even read it.
Right.
Because if I put it in one of these, obviously I would like share it with them, but that they could readily go click a link and download it instead of having to go through paywalls, having to do all this, pay $30 for an article that, they wrote. And so that their moms can read it, their dads can read it, their sisters, their colleagues, my students who are, coming up in their footsteps, So I just think a podcast is such a brilliant space too, to do this work and, have these ideas flourish because more people can be here.
More people can be here. More people. We want you to be a part of it. We want you to think about those things. And we want to learn from you, not just so that you can this is what we're reading. Yes, learn about that, but also what do you have to say and contribute to these conversations? Because if the message and the word and accountability is not in our communities, right? What we're saying and writing about, then what is all of this for, really? What is all of this? So don't get it, when we're on here, you see me in the street, you could call me Tiffany, unless you're trying to be disrespectful, like the person who tried to play Dr. Biden. And you call me doctor every day. But it's not, but the work is not really about that, right? We all have a hand. This is a village that's raising these kids, that's thinking about this, and we want to do our best. We want to learn. We want to keep pushing ourselves. We want to keep being reflective. So with that being said, the purpose of the Evolving Education Project podcast is to make discussions and knowledge around the education of people of color more accessible to families and all educators, and more inclusive to non-traditional educators and to a variety of educational spaces, like what Grace was talking about, especially like the kitchen table. It is not only a space where knowledge production and distribution happen, it is a space for those who love and are invested in the lives of people of color to co-construct knowledge and reclaim the direction of our futures and our educational and political agendas. Because we done had enough of everybody else telling us what we need to do and what we need and what's wrong with us. It ain't nothing wrong with us. And we're going to direct this moving forward. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Thank you. Okay. So each monthly series begins with a gathering where I and a group of friends informally talk about our views and current news and issues that connect to the theme from a book that centers people of color. Next is the book interview, where we engage in a rich dialogue with the authors of the book. And the final segments are where we showcase people who engage in practices that are espoused in the book, where it could be children, youth, parents, teachers, educators, activists, community workers. We might engage places where the work is actually happening, such as community groups, centers, networks, institutional centers, schools, classroom organizations, and or other actualizations of the work. Because this work can happen in so many ways, right? And we also invite folks to write in and share personal stories or questions about the theme, so that we can share those stories with our audience and offer informal advice if requested, because we're not trying to act like we're the sole experts. But if you having an issue with some, or you want to know more about something, you have a specific situation, you can write in, and we want to be a space to think about those ideas. And we're probably asking the same questions. Some of us, like and my friends and the village, we probably have gone through some of those similar things. Or maybe your story could help us out, help us to really think about our work and what we need to be doing. Maybe we're not asking the right questions in our research. Maybe we need to be pushed. So we want that to be an open space, right?
Absolutely. I love it.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Grace D. Player, my sister, for being here today for on my first episode. You've been through the whole process. Hey. And I called her at the last one. I was like, Grace, can you come on? She was like, yes, sissy, yes. And so I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. And what I'm gonna do, how I'm gonna end, which when Grace, when you was talking about the kitchen tables, you was all in my little poem. But, I am gonna end with a poem, because we're throwing around the word education. I want to be clear that you understand what we mean by education, right? And so this poem that I wrote is called Education According to the Evolving Education Project. So here we go. Education is a manifestation of your innermost joys, passions, interests, and inquiries. Knowledge that is intellectually rich, justice-centered, transformative, empowering, liberatory, healing, loving. What is more, education connects you to yourself, your history, and your ancestors. Reimagines what is possible for you and your community. Draws upon a multitude of racially, linguistically, and culturally based frameworks. Responds to the contextualized hopes and aspirations of any given educational space or place. As a matter of fact, education is happening everywhere. It happens in homes, on porches, around kitchen tables, in mosques, in temples, in churches, on swing sets, in classrooms, in community centers, in community groups, in virtual spaces. It happens in cipher while critically listening to the unspoken nuances of rap lyrics and beatboxing. During protests while interpreting homemade signs painted with activist messages. At rallies when listening to the fanciful alliterations that decorate calls for justice. In local libraries when elders stop us to share books, poems, or unofficial true history. In the stillness of classrooms where hearts, minds, and spirits are all at once captivated. At Auntie's house, as she schools you, feeds your soul, and mends your heart. In essence, educational spaces and places are not institutionally bound. And this is very important, not all educators are in schools, nor do they list letters after their names. Educators educate, formally and informally. Above all else, educators manifest your innermost joys, passions, interests, and inquiries in intellectually rich and transformative ways.
Ooh. I love it. I'm feeling all sorts of things and so excited for this space, so excited for what you're creating here that is not only taking these different people, different ideas, different communities, but also different genre and different, modalities to make meaning. So love it. So excited. So proud.
You're such a sister. I'm so proud of you. Beautiful artwork that you created. So thank you. I'm going to stop this recording now. I just want to thank you all for listening to the first episode of the Evolving Education Project podcast. I hope you now have an idea of what this is all about. I want to especially thank Dr. Grace D. Player for joining us today and telling us more about the beautiful artwork she created for us. Grace's work is rooted in her experiences as a woman of color, a daughter to an immigrant woman, and a sister to many. She is a literacy scholar, educator, and artist who has a long-standing commitment to collaborating with communities of color. Her work attempts to challenge colonizing methodologies by centering relational and collaborative knowledge building and by utilizing the power of arts and aesthetics in communicating and exploring theory. She is currently an assistant professor of literacy at the University of Connecticut Nyachae School of Education, where she is co-facilitating a critical autoethnographic coalition with a group of pre-service and early career women of color teachers. And now more about me, Tiffany M. Nyachae, your host. I am a Black woman and descendant of enslaved African peoples in the United States. I am a native of Buffalo, New York, and I was raised by my loving village. My lived experiences and complicated historical connection to this land foregrounds my justice work in various contexts for the purposes of reimagining schools, our world, and overall social transformation. As a former middle school teacher of urban Black youth and now an assistant professor of education at Penn State University College of Education, I am interested in the continuous, transparent, and reflective work that is required from those who claim to center social justice in their leadership, practice, and research. Hosting the Evolving Education Project podcast grants me the opportunity to bring together others who share these interests. To find out more about the Evolving Education Project, to write in, or to join our listserv, check us out at evolvingeducationproject.com. And please subscribe to this podcast and follow us on social media. We hope to cultivate an authentic audience and community. We want you to help us to evolve over time and shape what this could be. Now that you know what we're about, let us know what you want to learn more about, authors that you would like us to interview, discussions you would like us to have. Okay, that's all for now, good people. We out. EvolvingEducationProject.com